Hello everyone, welcome to what is going to be the first of a series of tutorials about stuff in Cubase, and hopefully you'll find these useful and things that you might want to integrate into your composition work or any other aspects of your creative work as well. You have to excuse my voice today, I've got a little bit of a sniffle, so I may have to just sniff a little bit. I'll try and remove them from the audio. Anyway, I hope this is useful. You know, you can find hopefully some of you second years will be using hopefully these kind of techniques in your composition work, and some of the first years may find some of this stuff useful. It all depends on the application, and obviously a lot of the techniques that I talk about are quite generic and can be applied to various different applications and software and so on and so forth. So if you're using Ableton at home or using Logic, then the concepts and stuff I talk about are very, very transferable in terms of different software. Anyway, so what we're going to be looking at today is using LFOs, and specifically using LFOs to create kind of pulsing effects on a bass line. So what we've got here is just a simple bass line. I'll play it a little bit. So that's just a repeating bass line. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to use LFOs to modulate. And that's the key thing of what LFOs are going to be using for. What we're going to be using LFOs for is to modulate. Some of the things we'll talk about in class a bit later on will be how we use modulation-based effects, and modulate meaning to change. So we're going to use it to change and create a pulsing effect. So it's a very common technique. You hear it a lot in things like dubstep, wobble bass lines, stuff like that. It's not really my thing in terms of music, but it's a valid technique and something which is relatively simple and easy to master. Anyway, so we've got a very simple bass line. I'll just kind of I'll show you the Retrologue. We're doing this in Retrologue. So I'm going to show you how you can use a matrix in Retrologue. So you can see here I've got two sawtooth waveforms, slightly detuned from each other. I thought they were, but they're not. But I'll do that anyway. I've got like a reverb and a chorus effect on there, and I've got like an envelope on the cutoff as well. So what I've got here with a bit of distortion as well, you'll see that there. So it kind of creates this kind of sweeping effect. You can hear that kind of effect. If I slow it right down, you can hear it much more pronounced that way. So if I turn the envelope right up, so you can kind of get an idea. What I'm going to do a bit further on down the line, I'll do a tutorial about using envelopes with synths and how you can use them to create those kind of nice, cool, wobbly kind of bass sounds. But we'll do that again. We'll do that later on. So this is just, we're going to be looking at using the matrix, which is this section down the bottom. And I'm going to be using that to modulate the pulse and create a pulsing effect on the long notes. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is how we assign the matrix, the LFO, to the actual matrix, and how we can set up the LFO to do what we want it to do. Now, the default settings that you see here in the LFO, you can see you've got 4 LFOs that you can use in Retrologue. LFO 1, 2, 3, 4. There's also an envelope 3 as well, which we can assign to different ways. But we're going to focus on LFO 1. And we're going to basically, you can see basically what is an LFO first of all. Well, an LFO is simply just it stands for low frequency oscillator, and it's simply just another oscillator which we use purely for modulation purposes. It's designed to run at a very, very low frequency, and you can see the frequencies can run from 0.03 hertz all the way up to sort of, I think it's 30 hertz at the top end. And that the hertz is used to create that pulsing effect. So I can go into I can choose what waveform I want to use, squares, randomized ones. But for this, I'm just going to use a standard sine wave. The important point is this one here. The important part is this bit here, the sync mode. And the sync mode, I can set to tempo, and then you'll see I can select the frequency, changes to a numerical musical value. So for example, 8ths would be quavers, 16ths would be semiquavers, and quarters would be crotchets. So you can choose which rhythmic value you want. You can go really, really slow with minims and like semi-breathes and so on and so forth. And there's all different fractional values and stuff like that you can use. So it's a really useful tool. And it also, obviously, it syncs to the DAW. So if your tempo is set to 100 BPM and you're pulsing at, you set it to 8, so it will pulsing in time with quavers. So if you're setting up some rhythmic sort of drum hits, you can tempo sync your LFO to those drum hits and stuff like that. So I'm going to start off with slow minim kind of pulsing first of all. All right, so I've set my frequency to 1/2. So basically every 2 for every bar. That's what the 1/2 means. For every 1 bar, there's 2 pulses. And then I'm now going to assign LFO1 to the cutoff. This is what I'm going to use. Basically, what I'm going to be doing is this. So that's what I'm going to be basically doing. Okay. To do that, the source in the matrix, it's all done in the matrix, which is this section down here. And obviously, this matrix is set up, so you've got 4 slots. But there are 4 different sections of the matrix. So you've got page 1, page 2, 3, and then 4. So in page 1, I can say, for example, I want to select LFO1. And you can see you can select any different modifier, controller, and so on and so forth. You can select the 4 LFOs, envelope 3, which is the one which is assigned there. The amp envelope, which is this one here. The filter envelope, this one here. Velocity that the notes are playing, so on and so forth. Pitch bend, mod wheel are your controllers on your keyboard. But for now, LFO1, I'm going to use to assign to the cutoff. So you can see again, I've got all different options there. Cutoff, resonance, distortion level. I can go into oscillator specifics, LFO specifics. I can get one LFO to modulate the frequency, another one, all sorts of different things. So, but now I'm going to just use cutoff. So now what I should find is it's not doing anything yet. It won't do anything until I change the depth control. So depth control basically is telling how far around that cutoff it uses a central point from my cutoff point and going how far away down and then up and down and up from that cutoff point. So you can see now how much it's varying. It's going very, very low, the cutoff very, very low to very, very high. If I turn the depth down, you can just hear a vague kind of pulsing effect. By going in the minus, you're just simply reversing the idea of the depth. It's the same kind of thing, but just reversing the kind of waveform. But so that's fine. So you can set that to a set point. For example, if you do it all the time, it sounds a bit tedious. I suppose actually on moving sounds and stuff like that, it's not too bad. But what I want to do, I want to use automation to control the frequency and change the frequency halfway through notes. And that's what you often hear in things like dubstep with wobble basses. You get pulses which change frequency and change pulse. So it kind of goes bom, 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 that kind of effect. And that's what I'm going to do here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use automation to do that. I'm going to set up the automation lane so I can then adjust it by hand. So put write mode on. So this is my read and my write for the instrument. I'm going to press play, and I'm simply just going to change the frequency. What that will do, it will generate an automation lane for me. Right. So you can see now, I'm just going to hide that one. I'll leave it there for a minute. So you can see basically what it's done is generated that automation lane based on the position points when I changed the settings in the instrument. So what I can now do, I can now move those around a little bit and change them. Now, if you keep an eye on the frequency, which is this bit here, all right, you can see basically what it will be doing now because I'm changing the automation, it's moving. So I can see I can move that around based on automation. Now, as I said before, what I want to do, I want to have it applied just to certain notes. To do that, I need to also use automation to control the depth of that as well. So let me set that up first and generate that automation lane as well. So I'm going to set my depth to 0. And I put that up to 100%. You can see the depth lane is now there. So I'm going to move that to the beginning. So I got a starting point of 0. And I'm going to just remove all these automation points that I've just put in. So I want my depth to be 0. I only want to modulate the long notes. I only want to modulate the long notes. So to do that, I'm going to leave the depth at 0, and I want the depth to come up to 100% at, if I change the grid to quantize, there, I want it to come to 100% there. And I want to go back to 0 there. I want to go back to 100% there. And for those 3 notes there. And back to 0 there. I'm going to just change that to value to 0. It's much easier to do it that way. Now, because it's a 2-bar section, I'm actually going to cut that away. Because actually, one of the clever things about Cubase is actually it can copy and paste automation. So I can now, oops, didn't mean to do that. I'm going to duplicate that part, and you'll see it's duplicating the automation. So now what's going to happen is going to be no automation, no modulation on these 2 notes here. It'll start there, and it'll modulate only those notes when the depth is at 100%. Don't worry about the pulsing. It's going to be a bit weird at first. There you go. So you can see now I've used automation just to affect certain notes. Let me delete that. So what I want to do, I'm going to set different levels. And I'll show you how this will all set up in the instrument as well. So the first one, I want to select a slow automation. So I'm going to choose something like back to minims, I think. So you can see that there. No. So there's my frequency of being a minim. So that's what I want for the slow ones. For this bit, I want fast. So I'm going to bring that down to, you can see the values changing as I move the automation up and down. I want that to be 16ths there. Going down maybe to 8ths at that point. Going back to minims at that point. And that should sound something a bit like this. If you watch this part of Retrologue, it should work. Now, what I'm going to do, because you can hear the... you lose the first bit of that note, I'm going to make that depth increasing gradually. Let's see what that sounds like. Maybe making it a bit more quicker. We're using automation. Just fix that automation's not being quite where I want it to be. And that's the same thing there. It's kind of doing it because it's starting in the negative kind of on the pulse. I could actually, what I could try is reversing the depth of that. Let's see what that sounds like. But then I'm left with a bit of a short note, so it doesn't kind of work that great. So it's not ideal. What I could do is, rather than have a minim pulsing on that bit, I'm going to bring that down to a really fast 32 and see what that's like. Let me do that. Let me just delete that point, and I'll bring that one back up so it's all on the same 100% depth. And you get the idea. You get the hopefully you can see how the pulsing is changing based on the settings that I've got. Go from 16ths to 8ths to 32s with a slow minim pulse on the first bit. Once I'm happy with my automation, I can go back, I can delete those automation lanes, and I can recopy those parts. And all that automation that I've done in the first 2 bars is now pasted across. And that works quite well. You know, it's not perfect. It's not like a, you know, full-on well-produced. It's just showing, the key thing of these tutorials is just showing you the tools. That's all it really is. You can see, and the good thing about automation is you can see that occurring. You can see those processes happening. If you look here at the depth control and here at the frequency, you will see those things changing. So that's the automation working in order to make those changes. And there we go. That's basically that done. Now, there is one other thing I want to quickly just show you. It involves me removing the depth control because that will cause havoc, play havoc with that, and take the write mode off and take the read mode off. No, I'll leave that on. So what I can then do in Retrologue is you can actually change the way it's kind of way the depth level is controlled. Rather than have the depth being controlled directly by automation, you can assign it to a controller. More specifically, the modulation wheel. And the modulation wheel is obviously the one on your keyboard, which I can move. You can see moving now on the Retrologue page. What this is now going to do is going to control. I can now control the depth with the automation wheel. So at the moment, if I put it to 32, so it's a bit easier to hear. So at the moment, even though the depth, you can see the depth is up full. So even though the depth is up full, it's not doing anything because the mod wheel, you can see down here, is at 0. When I turn the mod wheel up, because it's gradual, and basically it's no different really than me using automation to change and move that around. But it's a nice, easy way to play. And if you're playing something in and you want to kind of get a bit of a feel for it, it's a nice, easy way to do that. So it's something you can play around with a little bit and experiment with. So, as it's MIDI, you can also record it. The idea of that as well is because it's MIDI, you can record it, you can change it, and you can basically play it in real time and then edit it further on. But that's no real different than automation, although I think it's a bit more tactile using a mod wheel in order when you make those changes and if you're recording stuff like that in real time, it's much a more tactile approach for those kind of processes. Anyway, and that's it. That's it for today. So it's just about using LFOs, how we might use LFOs, and the key thing to take away from it as well is remember that LFOs can be assigned to anything. So you can get it assigned to cutoff, resonance. You can change it. You can use it to shape the envelope. Oscillator changes. You can get it to do anything. So at the end of the day, it's a modulator. You can assign it to pretty much anything and use it within the matrix. And that's the key thing, is using it within the matrix. So it is real life, not like the real Matrix. Anyway, right, that's it for me. I'm signing off now. I'll speak to you all again with tutorial number 2, which I haven't decided what it's about yet, but I'll speak to you then. Bye-bye.